Anekantavad video. The nature of axioms. So we shouldn't even have to play with these words. We could just say premises, fundamental, the foundations of rational conversation. Whatever the ingredients are, those basic ingredients, the round wheels on the car kind of thing. There's basic constituents to having a rational conversation about anything. And those basic constituents are this rubber has to hit the highway somewhere kind of stuff. But anyway, so an axiom is supposed to be some sort of self-evident truth, or a truth that is beyond reasonable assailing. It's something that you just can't argue with it reasonably. And then you establish it as an axiom, as a truth, as a foundational fact that you don't need to, that is going to be established as a fact for the purpose of continued logical extrapolation. You will now build on that fact. So here he's using it as an example of why he rejects logic, an argument that has no axioms in it. No self-evident facts, and certainly no statements of theory that are beyond reasonable question or assailing. So here we go. Axiom. Intelligence exists and is measurable. Aren't we already in trouble? I mean, really, the nature of intelligence, you think that is something that you can even just say the word without any qualification at all? I mean, you really can't really use the word intelligence without some context. It's always in a context. Whether you're talking about intelligence like intelligence organizations, where intelligence is about information, just raw knowledge, then other points where intelligence is about something about how you process knowledge, like how good your algorithms are, how efficient they might be. And certainly it could be stated that if I spend 10 years shooting baskets, or I spend 10 years reading science books, that I'm likely at the end of the 10 years to be qualified as more intelligent if I did the 10 years reading the books, because we've sort of associated this word intelligence with the acquisition of knowledge. Alright, but this axiom is not an axiom. Measuring intelligence, again, what are you measuring? Are you measuring the capacity to process information, or the capacity, or the fact that you have acquired information? And are you measuring me based on some relative standard to how other people are performing, or are you measuring me by some absolute standard that doesn't measuring something like my vocabulary skills or my literacy, or whether I had to go to work when I was 15 or 12 or 11. Anyway, axiom. Race exists and humans are racially classifiable. So that's an axiom. So he's claiming this is a self-evident truth, okay, that's beyond reasonable dispute. I would say that, to some extent, cultural heritage exists, whether you want to call that race or not, that you have genetically, that we do have genetic histories. But race is a tricky word. Alright, axiom. IQ testing is an accurate means of assessing intelligence. So he's saying that's a self-evident truth. That we know that these are tests that are actually measuring something called whatever intelligence is again. How can we be accurately measuring something when we haven't even been able to explicitly or accurately, for even the context of your diagram, establish what kind of intelligence you're talking about? Knowledge-based, knowledge processing. Research. IQ tests are conducted on persons of a variety of races based upon the three axioms. That's research, so that's not an axiom. Okay, fine. Analysis. The results of the research reveal a noticeably lower average IQ for persons of African ancestry. Noticeably by what, again, standards, right? Did you 2-year-old Africans what classification of African Americans were you analyzing? Ones who grew up in the 50s? Ones who grew up in the 90s? Oh, that's right. None of that's here, so we don't know what any of this analysis is based on, do we? No. Conclusions: persons of African heritage are less intelligent than whites and Asians. So this is how he says this is the evil of logic. He says this is axioms and logic. So this is an example of the common use of logic. And let us say that even if these statements were not as wrong as these are not axioms to start with, but let's say they were. Let's say they were true, and they were true or proven or demonstrated beyond a reasonable doubt. If this was a truth, if it was a fact, the fact that you don't like it means what? You reject logic because you don't like the fact? I mean, that's the joke of it. He's claiming this is somehow a truth. These axioms are true, right? I mean, they sort of have to be established by some standard of credibility, or they can't be what would be called by any agreeable standard axioms. Oh, so because some racist guy says they're axioms? Oh, is that all it takes? Yeah, I don't think so. So, anyway. Yeah, I mean, you just know this is going nowhere. But this is right, this is the definition of propaganda, I think. Yeah. Yeah. There's liars and then there's statistics, right? Or something like that. So let's play along.
Inevitably gets bogged down at this point when you're trying to explain a position that rejects logic. That's not something that goes down very well in Western civilization.
Well, let's just understand. What's the alternative to logic? What's the alternative to logic? What's the alternative to logic? Oh, there is no alternative. You can do good logic or you can do bad logic, but frankly, there's no alternative. You can't do non-logic or unlogic and have any reliable hope of coming up with the right answer. So there is nothing else but logic. It's rationality, right? What's the alternative to rationality? Irrationality. There's no alternative. Complain because people aren't doing it well. But to say it's logic's fault would be idiotic. And again, this isn't logic because this is a lie. These are not axioms by any reasonable definition of the word axiom.
To say that you don't accept at least the absoluteness of logic. I wasn't saying that I rejected logic, actually, but it was more that I accepted it provisionally, and that we must maintain that provisionality throughout.
Yeah, so we must pay, it doesn't mean anything, right? We must retain a provisionality that just is based on conclusions. If we don't like the conclusion, okay, then we can criticize or reject the logic that got us to the conclusion. But that's all he's saying. It's judge the conclusion. Don't judge the logic. If the logic isn't broken, the conclusion has to be dealt with. Not thrown away, dealt with.
There is a reason for this. I never quite got around to describing why, but I've drawn this flowchart here to explain why. I guess I should have probably numbered the bits along the way, but it starts in the left-hand side, goes over to the right.
All right, well,
enough from the yellow to the green. And
I guess I'll let him say his piece, and I'll come back. There's no point in me. I mean, it's visually uninteresting, so I'll be back. Take notes or whatever. All right, so we just got to finish saying the line. We take axioms and we make them into facts, and that is the danger. No, you've got it backwards. The danger is when you call something an axiom when it's not a fact. That's the danger. All right? So axioms are fine and they are functional. They just have to be stated explicitly and unassailably, or they're not axioms. They're not axioms unless they are self-evident or beyond reasonable dispute. What you've stated here, none of this is any of that. There's nothing self-evident in the word intelligence. Nothing. It has no self-evident meaning. It has no self-evident description. If I ask 100 people to give me a definition of the word intelligence, do you think I'm going to get the same definition from those people? Quite obviously, it can't be called an axiom, okay, because people don't even have the same understanding of what the word means. So right there, you're in big trouble. And then obviously, I think you're in trouble with this idea that you're going to now test for this thing that you haven't defined and say somebody has more of it than somebody else. What's the point? Right? And so, like I said, even if you could find some thing that actually existed, like knowledge, you could argue that, well, of course, people who have read more books would have more knowledge. They have acquired it. They've consumed it. People who play musical instruments are likely to be more proficient at playing musical instruments. Exposure is going to have a huge impact on what might qualify as your intelligence. And then if it's going to be just about puzzle solving or some other mechanism, then it has to be made independent of cultural references and cultural identity, maturation. So again, that test can't even be made clearly to be a judge of intelligence. It's going to be a representation of what is valued by the culture in terms of what is described as a problem and what is described as a solution. Many people think God is the solution to the problem of a bastardized culture. It's a silly answer. Can I say they failed an intelligence test? Are wrong answers? Isn't it more about having an absence of wrong answers? You know, wouldn't that be the better measure of intelligence, is to find out how many misconceptions you don't have, how many misimpressions you don't have, misperceptions you don't have? Yeah, that might be the real measure of intelligence. So anyway, it's just kind of a, like I said, he has no respect for the idea of being boxed into something called logic and reason. And because he knows that logic and reason will not allow him to justify being a selfish cunt. Yeah, so he has to destroy logic and reason, because logic and reason sort of obligate you not to be a selfish cunt. Alright, I'll be back. Alright, this part's worth playing, but it's funny.
We have two choices when we look at this kind of a dilemma. By the way, I think that Benatar's asymmetry is similar to this. He takes certain things as axiomatic and then pushes them to conclusions that most people would find absurd.
There you go. Most people would find absurd. So he pushes them to conclusions that most people would find absurd. So most people can't understand the concept he's saying. Okay, of the difference between something being a pure good, a positive, and a good that's made out of correcting for a negative. That conceptually, most people can't grasp that. That's probably true. But again, this whole idea that most people would find absurd. So isn't it absurd right there? Isn't that a fallacy you've just used in an argument? Isn't that like one of these axioms? So fallacies are axioms, essentially. These are statements that describe circumstances when you use a certain kind of argument that it's fallacious, that it has no foundation when taken to its reasonable conclusion. Now, the reasonable conclusion, the idea, the very idea that most people is a standard of intelligence is exactly upside down, because that's what another one of these bell curve things kind of point out to you. Okay, is that most people, okay, are on the negative side of exceptional. Most people aren't exceptional. Most people aren't right. Most people are wrong. Most people agree with the lowest common denominator, not the highest common denominator. Most people is a negative indicator, essentially, of right or wrong, or the right way. You want to find out how not to do something? Go take a survey and find out what most people say and do exactly the opposite, and you'll probably get it right. Because most people believe in tooth fairies. Most people are imbeciles. So, yeah, you've again, well, you have, as you deliberately do, exactly turned things upside down and misperceived, again, what these axioms are and what their purpose is. They're confining logical principles that say this is how you play a fair game with the facts. And the fair game with the facts has to be, you have to obey the rules, and you can't do that fallacy thing. Or you get somebody's going to, the referee throws a flag and says, oh, that's a fallacy. So you've been flagged. Okay. I don't know whether I should just play this. Well, I'll play a little more.
But given the way that we've, as a society, generally accept axioms as facts, it's not surprising that someone has done this. I was beginning to discuss the fact that I'd argued with Marxists along this line, and Marxists, at least some kinds of Marxists, I guess you'd call them Marxist-Leninists or something like that. Or
yeah, where are these people anyway? So this is another fallacy, the fallacy of straw man, the fallacy of scapegoating. I mean, it really is a straw man if you're going to bring up Marxist-Leninists, okay, in 2015, and say you really had these conversations. Oh, bullshit.
Some, vaguely Stalinistic or something, where they would say, society.
Oh, yeah, well, I've had conversations with Nazi-esque people. Well, wouldn't that be just like saying I've had conversations with insane lunatics, and now, because I've had conversations with insane lunatics, therefore, President Obama's a liar? Because I've had a conversation with an insane lunatic, therefore, it's stupid to have vaccinations. See, this is another fallacy you're committing here, where you're committing a grotesque category error, which is to say Marx is responsible for the asshole you were talking to. That somehow it's Marx's responsibility. Somehow his argument has to be, this guy gets to slander Marx's argument. You're allowed to now slander Karl Marx because somebody you're calling a Marxist, okay, farted in your face. And now that's Karl Marx farted in your face because that guy did. So that's a fallacy. You can't blame Marx for some asshole claiming to be a Marxist.
Idea is divided into classes. The class struggle defines history, and the ultimate aim of history, the teleological historical necessity, is to rid human society of classes. And inevitably what you...
Well, that isn't even the truth, but what is it? It really isn't. What it would really nice is to rid the human society of monarchy, of entitlement without earning. Okay, so yes, getting away from inheritance, what's the better word for it? What's the word I use all the time? Yeah, not inheritance. Oh, shit. Legacy. Yeah, legacy entitlement. Get rid of legacy entitlement, and yeah, the world will be a better place. And I think Karl Marx would have agreed with that.
Yeah, it is something resembling either the Gulag or the killing fields.
There you go. So, I mean, this isn't a fallacy. This isn't a violation of logic to say... I mean, there isn't even a logical connection here. He doesn't even give us a flow chart for this theory. Okay? Social justice equals gulag. Fair wage base equals gulag. Increasing the minimum wage, gulag. Ending obscene inheritance, gulag. Is there any flow chart for this fucking theory of yours? No. But you'll slander logic with your made-up argument that this is what they want to do, okay? They don't want justice, they want to make gulags.
Those are three examples of this kind of
this kind of. So I don't know. There are two examples: Benatar and Marxist gulaggery. Oh yeah, you're a fair cop.
I don't know, nebulous logic, where you
Nebulous, yeah, nebulous. Oh yeah, workers deserve the product of their productivity. Ooh, what a horrible theory.
if you're not careful when you begin at the beginning, like let's say that the yellow circle on the left-hand side is something that we all take for granted, and it's gotten to the point where we simply don't question it anymore.
Yeah, well, what does it have to do with anything in this conversation? What is not being questioned anymore? You seem to be the one who's saying it's unquestionable that capitalism is the way to go. It's unquestionable. It can't be questioned because the only alternative is gulag. Isn't that what you're saying, fuckhead? Yeah, it is.
Well, then by the time you get to the green, the process to go from the yellow to the green could take 10, 15, 20 years in someone's head. And they may have actually...
Yeah, well, I don't think anybody but an asshole would bother with it, would they? Would anybody but a complete fucking asshole give a shit? Because there's absolutely no effective way to implement any policy based on this crap, because you couldn't even find the real black people, because some of them are white now. And there's some white people who are really black. So I guess you'd have a real problem doing this, whatever the consequence of this theory is, you know. And it's all about what kind of percentage that makes what kind of difference. Does it really going to make a difference when you're pumping gas? I guess not. So most of the jobs people have now anyway, it wouldn't make any fucking goddamn difference. Just amazing.
Change their personality or change their point of view or evolved in a certain way based upon assuming that certain things are absolute facts.
Yeah, and it wouldn't, again, even if this was an absolute fact, wouldn't the counter argument could be that this is even a bigger reason to have affirmative action or affirmative policies to help yellow bust the inferiors up to a higher standard. We should spend more money on them because they need it, because they're disabled, right? So we could just call low IQ a disability. And now we'd have an excuse to spend even more money on social justice. Logically, it would be logical to do that, because it's a disability now.
To get them to go from the green back to the yellow is almost impossible in many cases, because then they will start saying you're nothing but a solipsist.
I don't even understand that reasoning, right? What does solipsism have to do with this fucking race theory shit? Oh, that's right, absolutely nothing. I don't know what he's talking about now. Do you know what he's talking about? I don't think you do either. I have to admit, maybe the human race isn't as dumb as I thought, because this does have 63 views and only 2 thumbs up this time. So maybe these people are starting to get a clue that this guy is fucking crazy.
If you ask me, the fundamental, I would say, error that takes place is at the yellow, where you assume that axioms are facts.
Well, look, you're not supposed to assume they're facts. You're supposed to be reliable. They're supposed to be reliably sensible statements. Now, you've decided to call them something, and you haven't qualified who said this is a truth, and this is a truth, and this is a truth, or how these truths were even established as premises. And certainly it would be in any kind of conversation. If you're using this as a theory, which most logic is a theory. I mean, it leads to a theoretical conclusion. Anyone can challenge these as axioms and say that's not an axiom, that's not self-apparent. Is that the right word? Well, anyway, it's self-evident. It's not self-evident, and it's not established beyond reasonable contention. Is it? Again, so 100 people are going to have the same definition of the word intelligence? Is that a truth? That it's easy to classify race? I mean, this is the assumption. It exists in humans, and it's classifiable. Do you mean it's really classifiable? I mean, do we really have genetic DNA tests on everybody? I don't think the government has my DNA. I mean, I think I have escaped having my DNA. So how do you know what I am?
They are not. The unfortunate corollary to failure to do that is that you get a situation like we have today concerning, say, the issues raised in this flowchart, where Anyway,
Yeah, again, this flow chart is just a piece of shit. It has nothing to do with axioms, facts, or logic. Nothing to do with any one of those things. Absolutely nothing. It has nothing to do with this conversation. It certainly doesn't explain what your alternative theory of knowledge is. So you are saying logic is suspect, therefore we should make it up. Oh, that's right. Let's just put a fable in its place then. So whatever thing we don't like, we'll just take that out and say Red Riding Hood says, Goldilocks says, Buddha says. Yeah, right. I get you. Oh, pathetic. All right, I'll be back. There's no point. There's no point. Wow, he really does have this all backwards. So, and he's just saying, he's contradicting himself in this whole conversation. So he says things like, you can't do this, and he got too much heat, and it's forbidden. Here he is showing it, and he's saying it's forbidden. This is forbidden knowledge. Obviously, it's a conversation. It's not going to win you a lot of friends, okay, in the sense that you're going to play some game saying, we the elitists, because that's how it's going to sound. Yeah, and so if you don't have the goods, this is really kind of a lame theory, right? So I mean, I'm just saying it's not exactly like proven. Yeah, it's not like the theory of evolution, right? This looks like Buddhism to me. Okay, this looks like a bunch of little cliches thrown together. Okay, this looks like something Nietzsche would put together, right? A bunch of just little bullshittyisms, strung together as if it's a logical argument. So this is more Nietzsche than logic. Okay, and so now he's again, and so he ends here just saying again this axiom thing. These are just axioms, not facts. So again, he just doesn't understand what an axiom is supposed to be. The axioms, you call something an axiom when it is a fact that has been established, when it is a fact you agree on. Yeah, that's how it works. When intelligence is defined by 100 people somewhat similarly. Oh, fuck.
This is an axiom. By the time you get to the green and you conclude this, you say, okay, persons of African heritage are less intelligent than whites and Asians. You can then, with a certain degree of, what would I call it, confidence or a certain lack of disorientation, go back to the yellow part. Without actually getting into that frustrating sense of disorientation and neo-solipsism, I guess.
Oh, I don't know what that... I don't know this. This is so idiotic, this solipsism thing again. What does this have to do with anything? If I wrote a flow chart here and I said evolution is the origin of the human species, okay, and then I pointed out that humans were at a point in history genetically related to, they have an ancestor who was a fish. I have these little facts put in here about what we are. I put in a fact about the attrition rate in nature, that for every mature reproductive adult, nature kills an average of 1,500 children. So to have one child reach maturation in the natural world, one child of sentience, one child mammal, 1,500 are killed or something, whatever the number would be. So I mean, I could put all these facts together and then have a little a little conclusion here saying, this is all fucking suck. This is a suck game invented by an ignorant molecule. Now, how do you go back and undo it? Oh, yeah, that's right, you can't. Haha. Yeah, but this crap, yeah, okay, so isn't this like the ultimate straw man? Find the stupidest argument, one of the stupidest arguments somebody could make, as a scientific theory, and disprove it. That's the nature of straw men, right? You create an opponent that has no muscles, all right? No eyeballs, no brain, no sense mechanisms, no capacity to fight back, and you beat the crap out of it. Wow, aren't you a hero?
Where your system has been...
That's really riding the tiger. Yeah, you took on the straw man. Wow, you're really tough.
Flexible enough from the beginning that you can
Fucking
revisit
girly
from
man.
the green all the way back to the yellow, relatively easily.
Yeah, yellow. That's where you're going. Yeah, that's your color, buddy.
This is not to say that axioms are not to be used, but we've got to remember what axioms are.
No, we don't. Everybody who's going to have a rational conversation is just going to establish, look, for the sake of this conversation, you can't, when you start losing the argument, say shit like, the magic unicorn did it. That's how it happened. Yeah, you can't just invent absolute crap, okay? Like, OJ was in Florida when his wife's head was cut off, okay? That's OJ's brother was in his house or something. You can't just make up shit. That's what the axioms are for. It's just to say, look, we're going to have a conversation. These are the rules. You just can't fucking goddamn fly off to fantasy land in the middle of the conversation and go, catch 22, I'm changing physics now.
Axioms are a tool to enable us to do certain things. We get axioms.
Now again, he's going to keep saying for us to do certain things. Now, isn't the whole point of going from facts to conclusions, isn't that whole fucking point to obtain knowledge? Yes, that's what it's for. It's not for you to win $100. That's not why I have conversations with people. I'm not in this to have conversations with people because I'm pulling the handle on a one-armed bandit or something and I have a strategy, based on axioms, based on fucktarded notions. It hasn't paid off for 4 days. It's gotta win now. I'm gonna win. Even though statistically it doesn't work that way.
As a point of departure for a certain series of, I would say, cognitions, or in this case, researches, to determine certain things. Now, in my scenario, we could do all of this research and not worry about it, and by the time we get to the green, we can then go back to the yellow and say, okay, now we've reached some sort of, I won't say a cul-de-sac, because, again, it's treated as a cul-de-sac by our society, but I would say, no, we've just gotten to somewhere that...
Cul-de-sac. Do they really say that in Canada? I mean, I was in Canada kind of a lot. I mean, my father's Canadian. He never said cul-de-sac.
Has the potential of having a negative impact on our society. It seems to be somewhat axiomatic in our society that all races are equal, and that even if we do accept races as existent, it's just a question of...
No is accepted. Judge a man based on the content of his character, not the color of his skin. So yeah, let's make that one. Okay, that sounds like a good plan. Let's judge people based on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Yeah, let's do that. That seems simple enough. Let's just not worry about anything else.
Appearance or something like that. So we can talk about black people, we can talk about Asian people, we can talk about white people without really worrying about generalizing about them in nefarious ways, or ways that have...
I don't see how you can possibly generalize about them without it being nefarious. Sorry, I just really don't see how there's any point to doing that at all. I really don't. I've spent zero part of my life even contemplating my ancestry. I've seen a couple of my relatives, like in the black and white pictures, and said, holy shit, they're creepy looking. And that's about as far as my interest went. I mean, I do have some knowledge that we were in America for a couple hundred years, fucking around, killing things. But who cares? I just couldn't give a rat's ass about even my own fucking heritage, let alone some fucking buddy else's. What I care about is whether they're a goddamn lying scumbag, or whether they're a propagandizing motherfucker, or whether they're a goddamn cheater at the most important game there is, which is the science of philosophy.
Invidious.
I mean, the discovery of truth. Yeah. Can they do that honestly?
Implications. Because again, if you get to green, you don't like what you see, you can then go back to yellow. it's not as though you've actually...
Again, how do you do that with axioms that are actually have integrity? The axioms Benatar gave you, you can't go back and undo them. It's just impossible. Preventing harm is good. Preventing cupcake eating isn't bad. It's just the truth. And the fact of it is displayed on Mars right now. We're not upset because they're not looking at rainbows while eating cupcakes on Mars. There's nobody on Mars eating cupcakes, watching rainbows. Nobody's doing that. And we're not at all upset. We don't have any impression of the badness of that. Now, if the Martians were suffering, dying of cancer, having chemo and shit, and reduced to 98 pounds and all that shit, we'd be aware that that's bad. Case proven. How are you going to undo that? Oh, that's right. You're not going to undo that. Because it's a fucking goddamn fact.
Boxed yourself in, which in my opinion...
Boxed in by, yes, you lost the argument. Don't get boxed in by losing arguments. Just cheat your fucking way out. Yeah, fuck. God, you people suck.
The Western scientific way of looking at things, or at least the logical way of looking at things.
So this he's calling scientific. This is his this is his impression of scientific. Yeah, and his theory about that Marxism always leads to gulags. Oh no, that's his theory. Oh, that's right. So that's not scientific. That's just fucktarded.
Has a tendency to do. This type of thinking, when you always remind yourself each and every step along the way, maybe, axiomatically yes, but axioms are not facts.
Facts are axioms. Facts are axioms. Axioms are supposed to be facts. That's what an axiom is supposed to be. It is supposed to be a self-evident truth, or a truth that is beyond rational rejection.
You are much less likely to get stuck the way that, say, this particular issue, i.e. what's colloquially known as race realism, has done. It's pushed Western science towards the green, towards that conclusion.
I don't know, where do you get that? Western science agrees with this? Huh? Liar. Yeah.
While forgetting the fact that intelligence exists and is measurable is an axiom. Race exists and humans are racial.
Again, so he's really saying this is a scientifically accepted theory of modern reality. Science is race realist. That's his accusation. If I go out and poll most people with a scientific degree in chemistry, biology, physics, they'll tell you that, yes, race realism is real. Racism.
Classifiable, that too is an axiom, and that IQ testing is an accurate means of assessing intelligence. Those are just axioms. So we don't really...
Again, this is just such a pile of shit. He just made this crap up. This is made up. This is not... No one said these are axioms. These aren't anybody's theory of axiom except his. This is not written somewhere. This is his invention. He invented connecting these principles, these statements, these inaccurate, fudgy, non-self-evident truths as axioms. He's called them axioms.
We can back off from the green without compromising everything that we've done all along if we have, as I say, a methodology that insists from the very beginning that we continually...
Yeah, but there's nobody who's for logic. Okay, if you do logic and the logic comes up with something that just sounds wrong, there's no rule against going back and saying, where did we make a mistake? And obviously in this diagram, it's easy to see where you made a mistake. What does this have to do with your theory that if you don't like a conclusion, you just throw it in the garbage without accounting for what axiom you're changing, without explaining how you have evidence or reason to dispute one of the arguments made in the logical chain. What in Benatar's theory, okay, have you proven to be rubbish? Nothing.
Remind ourselves that there is a difference between an axiom and a fact.
Well, again, they're not supposed to be a difference. It's the whole point. Fucktard.
This is not to say that we cannot deal with axioms or deal in axioms. What it means is we must always remember what axioms are.
Again, this is just so stupid. What we should remember is you can't have a rational conversation without establishing premises. There's no point in having a conversation if there's not agreed upon language in which to have the conversation. You can't have a conversation where somebody's allowed to say, catch 22, I don't have to accept that if I don't like it.
I hope this clarifies what we discussed.
We didn't discuss shit, actually. You people, if that's the definition of a discussion, you got another one of your axioms wrong. You got another one of your category. That's a category error. What took place in that room between you fucktards wasn't even close to something called a discussion. There's no way it could fall into the category discussion. It was just facial farting and shit. It was babble and mush and shit and crap and nonsense. Something that is those things can't be a discussion. That's an axiom. Okay. So, there, I'm done. Till next time and such. Oh, we're not going to have any smile. Let's see if he does something smiley here at the end. No smiley. Oh. Oh. Till next time.